In a world where history lies the cradle of human civilization isn't Sumer, but a forgotten race buried beneath the sands of time, when a rogue archaeologist unearths a crystalline artifact, pulsing with unearthly light, in the Antarctic ice it awakens ancient machines that rewrite the stars and whisper a truth that shatters everything humanity's origins trace back to a lost race from beyond Earth, whose remnants hold the key to our salvation or our annihilation. Hey guys, tonight we are going to rewrite the very beginning of everything you've ever been taught about human history. We're going to take that nice, neat little box labeled Sumer Cradle of Civilization, and we're going to gently set it on fire. You see, the story we all know is that everything started in the Fertile Crescent with mud bricks and beer, and the first grumpy accountants carving receipts into clay. But what if that wasn't the beginning? What if it was just the first echo of something far older, far grander, and long since vanished? You are standing in the shimmering heat of the Iraqi desert, the sun a merciless hammer overhead, dust coats your tongue, your skin, your soul. It's not the glamorous adventure you see in the movies. It's a slow, grueling process of scraping away time with a tiny trowel and a soft brush. And you probably wouldn't survive this for more than an afternoon before asking where the nearest Starbucks is. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight. So drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been at this for weeks of volunteer on a dig so underfunded it makes a student film look like a blockbuster budget. The site is a pathetic-looking mound of forgotten tale that bigger, more important expeditions have ignored. For decades, your patch of dirt is designated Grid C. For a thrilling title, for a patch of dirt, you're supposed to be documenting pottery shards from the Ubaid period, a culture that predates the Sumerians proper, a simple farming people who lived in mud brick houses and were a long way from inventing things like writing or the wheel. Your life has become a tedious search for broken pots, like trying to find a specific gray Lego in a bin of a million other gray Legos. It's mind-numbing work. The sun cooking your brain inside your skull, your only companions the whisper of the wind and the distant drone of a supply truck. You're on your knees, your back aching as you scrape away at a layer of soil dated to roughly 6,000 BCE, 1,000 years before the first Sumerian cities would rise. It's a layer that should contain nothing more than simple flint tools and the occasional animal bone. Then your trowel makes a sound that doesn't belong. Here it's not the dull thud of hitting packed earth, or the gritty scrape of stone, or the brittle crack of ancient pottery. It's a clean, sharp metallic clink. A sound is out of place here as a smartphone in the Roman Forum. Your first thought is that it's modern contamination, a piece of shrapnel, a bullet casing from one of the region's many conflicts. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Eris, a man whose face is a permanent mask of weary skepticism, wanders over, expecting you found another bottle cap from the 1980s. He's seen it all before, but as you carefully brush away the compacted soil, the shape that emerges is anything but modern. It's a small, flat object about the size of your palm, perfectly symmetrical and dark, a matte black that seems to drink the sunlight rather than reflect it. It's nestled in the dirt, as if it was placed there deliberately waiting. You can see the clear stratigraphy, the undisturbed layers of millennia, proving it wasn't dropped here recently. This thing has been sleeping in this exact spot for 8,000 years. We all know the official story. Sumer is where it all began around 4,500 BC. They gave us cities like Uruk and Uar. They invented large-scale irrigation, the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, and most importantly cuneiform, the first true writing system. It was an explosion of innovation that seemingly came from nowhere. Historians still argue whether this rapid development was due to a perfect storm of environmental factors, or perhaps the arrival of a new people with new ideas. This object in your hands, however, suggests an answer no one has ever dared to consider. You gently work your fingers underneath it, and lift it free of the earth. The moment it comes loose, you feel a strange sensation, not a sound, but a feeling, a low thrumming vibration that seems to resonate directly with the bones in your arm. It's cool to the touch, impossibly cool. In this blistering heat, Dr. Eris's jaw hangs slightly agape, his usual skepticism vaporized by the sheer wrongness of the artifact. This isn't a new part and out of place artifact, like the Antikythera mechanism, which was a stunningly complex astronomical clock from ancient Greece. Those are puzzling. But this is impossible. The Antikythera mechanism was made of bronze and found in a shipwreck. This object is made of a material nobody recognizes, and it was found in a geological context that predates metalworking itself by 3,000 years. It would be like finding a perfectly machined titanium screw inside a fossilized dinosaur bone. The surface is covered in markings finer than a human hair, etched with impossible precision. They aren't wedge-shaped like cuneiform or pictorial, like hieroglyphs. They look more like a microscopic circuit diagram or a map of a star system. No one has ever seen this. Isn't a record of a barley sale or a king's decree. It's something else, something alien in its complexity. You are holding in your palm the single object that proves the cradle of civilization was not a cradle at all, but merely a classroom built on the ruins of a forgotten Rome. Dr. Eris finally lets out a breath he seems to have been holding since the creation of the universe, or at least since you made that clinking sound. He looks like a man who just saw his entire belief system get hit by a bus, and then back up to make sure the job was done properly. His skepticism has curdled into a kind of terrified awe, and for a moment you think he might actually faint in the oppressive heat. The other members of your small team are drawn in by the sudden silence, a silence more profound than the usual quiet focus of the dig. They gather around your small pit, the shadows falling over you, their faces a mixture of curiosity and confusion. You're still kneeling in the dirt, holding this impossible thing. In your palm, the low thrumming continues, a subtle vibration that has now settled into a steady bass note you feel more in your teeth than you hear with your ears. It's the kind of feeling you get standing too close to a massive power transformer, but there's nothing organic about it. It feels ancient and impossibly advanced all at once. You wish you could pull out your phone and Google black alien space tile found in 8,000-year-old dirt, but the signal out here is a laughable fiction. And besides, what would you even search for? You turn the object over in your hand. It's shockingly light, for its apparent density may be weighing as much as a small river stone, but feeling far more substantial. The material is the biggest puzzle. It's not obsidian, it's not any known ceramic or metal. It has the matte finish of unglazed porcelain, but a subtle iridescence plays across its surface. When you tilt it like oil on water, it's warm now, having absorbed your body heat, but it still feels fundamentally different from any natural material you've ever touched. The edges are perfect, razor sharp, yet they don't cut your skin, a paradox that makes your brain ache just a little bit. The markings are the true insanity. They cover one entire face of the tablet, a dense web of interlocking geometric-shaped spirals and lines so fine you have to squint to see them clearly. They aren't carved or etched in a traditional sense. It's more like the material itself grew into this pattern. The lines seem to have a depth to them, as if you're looking down into a three-dimensional map. A traditional cuneiform tablet from Sumer is a reassuringly simple thing. It's a lump of clay stamped with wedge-shaped marks using a reed stylus. It was a system that started as simple pictures of things like a head of barley or a cow, and evolved over centuries into a complex script capable of recording epics like Gilgamesh. It's a technology you can understand and replicate with a bit of mud. And to stick this thing in your hand is something else entirely. It bypasses the entire slow evolution of human writing. It's like comparing a cave painting to the source code for a virtual reality simulation. Some fringe theorists have long pointed to things like the Vinca symbols of Neolithic Europe as potential evidence of a lost script that predates Sumer, but those are just a few isolated scratches on pottery. Historians still argue whether they constitute a true writing system or are merely symbolic decorations. This artifact doesn't just suggest a writing system, it suggests a mastery of information density that we are only just beginning to achieve in the 21st century. You trace one of the spiral patterns with your finger, and as you do, the thrumming seems to intensify for a second, and you get a flash of an image in your mind's eye, not a thought, but a pure sensory download. Green, so much green, and the feeling of cool, moist air, and the sound of rushing water. It's gone as quickly as it came, leaving you feeling dizzy and disoriented. Dr. Eris finally finds his voice, though it comes out as a dry croak. Put it down, he says gently. You carefully place the object onto a clean piece of cloth laid out on the edge of the pit. The team stares at it like it's an unexploded bomb, which in a way it is. An entire field of study, an entire narrative of human history, is about to be blown to smithereens. Dr. Eris, the man of science, tries to reassert control, running through a checklist of logical possibilities. It could be a fulgurite, he mutters to himself. Lightning striking sand can create strange glassy forms. But he knows it's not that. Fulgurites are hollow glassy tubes, not perfectly symmetrical data slates with micro-etchings, a modern hoax. Then someone buried it here, but the stratigraphy is perfect. The layers of soil above it are a pristine, undisturbed cake of time that you yourself have painstakingly excavated. It's been there since before the first pyramids were a blueprint in an architect's mind, before Stonehenge was erected, before the concept of a king even existed. The conversation among the team is a hushed, frantic whisper of impossibilities. This single discovery will render every textbook on ancient history obsolete, turning them into nothing more than very effective doorstops. The controlled world of academic archaeology has just been invaded by something that belongs in a science fiction novel, and there's no protocol for this. There are protocols for pottery shards, for human remains, for crumbling walls, but there's no chapter in the handbook for dealing with technology left behind by a ghost civilization 8,000 years ago. Dr. Eris makes a decision. The dig is over for now. This site is to be secured, and this object needs to be taken somewhere safe, somewhere with equipment far beyond their meager budget. It needs a scanning electron microscope. It needs mass spectrometry. It needs to be protected from the world until they have the faintest clue what it is they have found, because if this tablet says what you think it might say, it's not just a record of the past. It could be a map to a future no one ever knew was lost. The journey from the dusty plains of Iraq to a sterile, climate-controlled laboratory in Germany feels like a jump between centuries. The black tablet now resides in a vacuum-sealed lead-line case, looking for all the world like the most important briefcase in human history. You and Dr. Eris have become its unwilling guardians, its silent disciples. The atmosphere on the flight was thick with a mixture of paranoid silence and giddy terror. Every bit of turbulence felt like the universe trying to reclaim its lost secret. Now you stand behind thick glass in an observation room, sipping terrible coffee and watching a team of specialists in cleanroom suits swarm around the artifact like priests attending a holy relic. They are the best of the best: material scientists, cryptographers, astrophysicists, all of them lured here by a single encrypted message from Dr. Eris that basically said, "I found something that breaks physics, please help." The first reports that filter back are a cascade of eloquent scientific confusion. The material composition is impossible. It's a carbon-based lattice, but structured in a crystalline form that should be thermodynamically unstable, a state of matter that has only been theorized in the wild world of quantum mechanics. It has a half-life so long it makes uranium-238 look like a flickering candle. It is, for all intents and purposes, a perfect eternal storage medium. The real work begins when they use a scanning tunneling microscope to map the intricate markings on its surface. The initial data streams onto a massive high-resolution screen in the observation room, a breathtaking river of abstract geometry. The cryptographers are immediately stumped. It has none of the characteristics of language. There are no repeating symbols, no syntax, no structure that suggests a vocabulary. They jokingly refer to it as the universe's terms of service agreement, because it's clearly important and absolutely unreadable. One of the younger members of the team, an astrophysicist named Dr. Lena Petrova, stares at the screen, not with the frustrated gaze of the language experts, but with a look of dawning recognition. She spends 2 days in a silent fugue state, fueled by nothing but lukewarm coffee, and an intensity that makes everyone else nervous. She isn't trying to read it as a language, she's mapping the points and vectors, treating it as a dataset. And then she calls everyone into the main lab. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts through the room like a laser. "It's not writing," she says, pointing to the swirling patterns on the main screen. "It's a star chart." She brings up a 3D model on a secondary screen, a ghostly cloud of interconnected points. The team murmurs in appreciation. It's a beautiful representation of the night sky. But then Lena adds the twist: the constellations are all there: Orion, Taurus, the Pleiades. But their positions are subtly wrong. They're shifted by a few degrees. "This is the sky," she explains. "But not our sky, not now." This is where a known astronomical fact comes into play: the precession of the equinoxes. The Earth wobbles on its axis, like a slowly spinning top. A cycle that takes roughly 26,000 years to complete. This wobble causes the apparent position of the stars to drift over millennia. It's our planet's own cosmic clock, a way to date ancient records with incredible precision. Lena runs the tablets star map backward through a precession simulation. The star patterns on the screen begin to slide slowly back toward their familiar positions. The years count down on a digital display: 8,000 years ago, 9,000, 10,000. Finally, at around 12,500 years ago, the map on the screen snaps into a perfect match with the data from the tablet. A collective gasp fills the lab. The artifact isn't just older than the 6,000 BCE soil layer. It was found, and it's twice as old, dating to the very end of the last ice age, a time when most of humanity was supposedly huddling in caves and hunting mammoths. But then comes the second blow, a detail that is far more unsettling. They try to orient the star map to find its point of origin, assuming it's a map for interstellar travel pointing to a home world, but it doesn't align with any known star system or exoplanet candidate. It makes no astronomical sense. It was then Lena had a truly lateral thought, drawing on a quirky fringe tidbit about ancient cultures, possibly using stars for terrestrial mapping. What if the map wasn't pointing out there, but down here? What if it wasn't a map of space, but a map of the Earth using the stars as waypoints? She overlays the star chart onto a projection of the Earth. The patterns are a tantalizingly close match for certain coastlines and mountain ranges, but nothing fits perfectly. It's just a jumble, until she remembers a paper she read on paleoclimatology during a period known as the African Humid Period, a time when the Sahara Desert was not a desert at all, but a vibrant savanna of grasslands, lakes, and massive rivers. Historians still argue whether the sudden end of this green Sahara period was a primary catalyst for the rise of dynastic Egypt, forcing populations to congregate along the Nile. With a few keystrokes, Lena replaces the modern map of Earth with a paleogeographical reconstruction of North Africa from 12,500 years ago, when the desert was green and wet. And then it happens. Everything clicks into place. The star patterns on the tablet are not constellations. They are a perfect one-to-one map of the ancient Tamanrasset River system, a network of waterways that once flowed through the Sahara, fed by the West African monsoon. It was one of the largest river systems on the planet, and its ghost is still visible in satellite radar imagery today. The tablet's creators had mapped their world using the sky as a template, a breathtaking fusion of geography and astronomy. The team is silent, staring at the screen as Lena zooms in on the map's central point, the place designated with a symbol of 3 concentric circles. It's the heart of this lost world, the origin point of the map. The coordinates resolve to a location in modern-day Mauritania, right in the center of one of the most enigmatic geological features on Earth, a 40-kilometer-wide series of concentric rings, known as the Rikat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. The impossible tablet wasn't a record from Sumer, it was a map from an even more impossible place, leading to the ghost of a green world in the heart of the world's biggest desert. The world outside the lab seems to fade into insignificance. The discovery of the tablet was a crack in the foundation of history. Now the deciphering of its map is a seismic event that shatters the whole structure. You feel less like a scientist and more like a character in a forgotten myth, one who has just been handed the first page of a story far grander than anyone ever imagined. The team has moved from a state of shocked discovery to one of frantic purpose. The Rickhatch structure, the Eye of the Sahara, has always been a geological curiosity, a deeply eroded dome that geologists insist is a natural formation. Despite its startlingly artificial appearance, it has long been a favorite location for Atlantis theorists, a quirky and often dismissed fringe idea that connects its concentric rings to Plato's description of the lost city. Now you have a 1250-year-old map from an unknown advanced civilization that points directly at it. It's no longer a fringe theory, it's the only lead you have. The journey to Mauritania is a stark contrast to the sterile comfort of the German lab. You are back in the familiar embrace of scorching heat and endless sand, but this time the scale is different. The Sahara is not just a desert, it's an ocean of silica, a place that redefines your understanding of emptiness. You fly over the Rickhatch structure in a chartered prop plane, the only way to truly appreciate its scale from the ground. It's just a series of low rocky ridges, but from the air it's undeniable, a perfect bullseye carved into the earth. The concentric rings are there just as the map described, just as Plato wrote, an inner circle and outer circle separated by what would have been rings of water. The sight sends a shiver down your spine. Despite the oppressive heat in the cabin, the pilot, a grizzled Frenchman who has been flying these routes for decades, just shakes his head and mutters that he always knew there was something strange about that place. But seeing it now and knowing what you know is one thing. To understand the people who built it, you have to do something else, something the tablet seems to invite. You have to close your eyes and see it not as it is, but as it was. The low thrumming of the black tablet, which you now carry in a specially designed pouch, feels like a key catalyst for your imagination. You let the drone of the plane's engines fade away, and you drift. You let the 12,500 years fall away like grains of sand through your fingers. The relentless yellow of the desert bleeds away, replaced by a vibrant, impossible green. You are no longer in a plain, you are standing on the outermost ring of a great city. The air is soft and humid, filled with the scent of flowering trees and damp earth. The sky is a brilliant blue dotted with puffy white clouds. The sun is warm but gentle, not the tyrannical star of the modern Sahara. You hear the sound of water everywhere, a gentle lapping from the great circular canal at your feet, and the distant roar of a massive river, the Tamanrasset, feeding the city's heart. The city itself is a marvel of architecture and nature woven together in perfect harmony. The rings are not made of harsh stone, but of a living pearlescent material that seems to glow with a soft internal light. The buildings are not square boxes, but elegant spiraling towers that resemble seashells and unfurling ferns. They rise organically from the landscape, their forms dictated by some natural law of beauty you can't quite grasp. There are no roads, no crude paved surfaces. Instead, luminous pathways weave through lush gardens and across graceful bridges that arc over the canals. People move along these paths, but there are no vehicles, no beasts of burden. They glide with an effortless grace that is mesmerizing to watch. This is a world before the invention of the wheel, a concept that seems laughably primitive here. Historians still argue whether the wheel was first invented for pottery or for transportation, a debate that seems utterly irrelevant in a place that has transcended the need for such clumsy mechanics. You are seeing a city that is not built on the land, but grown from it, a symphony of concentric circles that mirrors the orbits of planets, the ripples in a pond, the structure of an atom. The outer rings are dedicated to agriculture, vast hydroponic gardens that shimmer under the sun, growing food in abundance without a single patch of tilled soil. You can see strange fruits and vegetables in colors you've never encountered before, all thriving in this perfectly managed ecosystem. The central ring, the one Plato described as being dedicated to the god Poseidon, holds the grandest structures, gleaming towers that touch the clouds, their purpose a complete mystery. They seem to hum with a quiet energy, the same resonance you felt from the tablet itself, but magnified 1,000-fold. It's a city that breathes a living organism of light, water, and life, and at its center is the source of its power, a detail no satellite image could ever show you. You realize with a jolt that the city's design isn't just for defense or aesthetics. It's a machine, a massive, perfectly tuned resonator designed to harness some form of energy you can't comprehend, perhaps drawing power from the Earth's own magnetic field or the subtle vibrations of the planet itself. It's a technology so advanced it appears to be magic, a concept familiar from so many ancient myths. The standard historical fact is that the first true city was Uruk in Sumer, founded around 4500 BCE, a chaotic, bustling place of mud brick walls and ziggurats packed with people, animals, and noise. Uruk was an incredible achievement, a testament to human ingenuity, but compared to this silent, graceful city of light, it is a child's sandcastle next to a cathedral of crystal. This place, this ghost in the Sahara, wasn't just a city, it was the heart of a global civilization that thrived while the rest of humanity was still chipping away at flint, and you are about to meet its inhabitants. The air in the green Sahara of your mind's eye is so clean it almost hurts to breathe, a stark contrast to the gritty dust of the present. You walk along one of the glowing pathways, your modern-day boots feeling clumsy and loud in this silent world. The path seems to guide you inward toward the city's central island, drawn by an invisible current of curiosity, and that ever-present hum. The structures around you are breathtakingly beautiful, their spiraling forms seeming to defy gravity, but it's the inhabitants that stop you in your tracks. They are the Lemnians, a name that flashes into your consciousness, not as a word, but as a pure concept, a descriptor of their very nature. They are tall and slender, moving with a liquid grace that makes even the most athletic human look awkward and stiff. Their skin has a faint luminosity, as if lit from within, casting a soft pearlescent glow. It's not a reflection, it's a biological luminescence, like a firefly or a deep-sea creature, but controlled and subtle, shifting through a soft spectrum of colors that seems to correspond with their emotional state or their thoughts. You see a pair of them glide past, one glowing with a soft rose hue, the other a tranquil blue, and you get a sense of a peaceful, affectionate exchange without a single word being spoken. Their faces are serene and elongated, with large dark eyes that seem to hold the wisdom of ages. They have no visible mouths or ears, yet you feel their presence, their awareness of you, not as a threat, but as a curiosity. They don't see you with their eyes. They sense your consciousness, a jumbled, chaotic mess of thoughts and anxieties that must feel like screaming static to them. You realize, with a profound shock, that they don't communicate through sound. Their language is a direct transmission of thought and emotion, a form of empathetic resonance that makes spoken words seem as primitive as banging rocks together. This is why their city is so quiet. There is no chatter, no shouting, no noise pollution, just the gentle sounds of water and wind and the faint city-wide hum. You feel one of them turn its attention to you, its luminous eyes meet yours, and you don't hear a voice in your head. You feel a concept, a welcoming wave of pure understanding that washes over you. It's a feeling of being seen, completely and utterly, without judgment. It's terrifying and beautiful all at once. It's a mainstream historical fact that language is one of the defining traits of Homo sapiens. Our ability to share complex ideas allowed us to cooperate and build civilizations. The evolution from simple grunts to the rich tapestry of human languages is a cornerstone of our development. But the Lemnians represent a different path, a biological telepathy that makes our most eloquent poetry seem like a crude approximation of feeling. You remember a fringe tidbit about the pineal gland, a small pine-cone-shaped gland in the center of the human brain, often called the third eye by mystics and spiritual traditions. Ancient philosophers, like Descartes, believed it was the principal seat of the soul, the connection between the body and the mind. Modern science dismisses most of this as pseudoscience, but Looking at the Lemnians, you wonder if our pineal gland is a vestigial remnant, a dormant receiver for a signal we no longer know how to tune into. You feel an invitation, a gentle psychic pull to come closer. One of them stands before you now, its internal light a soft gold of calm inquiry. It raises a long, slender hand, and for a moment, you think it's going to touch you. Instead, it gestures toward a nearby garden where a flower is blooming in a way that defies the normal passage of time. Its petals unfurling in a slow, graceful spiral that perfectly matches the architecture of the towers. You feel the Lemnian's thought stream, a flow of pure data that isn't in any language you know, but that your mind translates into understandable concepts. It's explaining the flower, its genetic makeup, its relationship with the light, the water, the very hum of the city itself. It's a lesson in biology, botany, and physics, all conveyed in a single instant of shared understanding. This is how they learn, how they teach, not through rote memorization, but through direct experience and downloaded knowledge. You feel like a child being shown a magic trick, a trick that is simply their everyday reality. Historians still argue whether human consciousness experienced a great leap forward. Around 50,000 years ago, a sudden explosion in art symbolism and complex tool use. The evidence for this is debated, with some arguing it was a more gradual process. But standing here in the presence of the Lemnians, you are presented with a third option. What if our consciousness didn't leap? What if it was pushed? What if our ancestors were touched by a presence like this one, a gentle guiding hand that planted the first seeds of abstract thought into our primitive minds? The Lemnians are not gods. They are gardeners. Their city isn't just a home, it's a conservatory. And their technology is not based on brute force, but on a deep understanding of life itself. They don't build machines, they grow them. They don't command nature, they collaborate with it. As you stand there basking in this silent communication, you realize the most shocking thing of all: these beings made of light and thought are not alien in the way you'd imagine. They are terrestrial. They evolved here on Earth in a parallel path to humanity, hidden away in this lush oasis, while our own ancestors were struggling to survive the harsh realities of the Ice Age. You are not looking at an invader from the stars. You are looking at Earth's other intelligent child, a species so advanced and so gentle that their very existence has remained a secret, buried under 1,000,000 square miles of sand and forgotten by time itself. A civilization whose greatest invention was not the sword or the atom bomb, but the simple act of being quiet and listening to the world around them. You are led by the silent, golden-hued Lemnian deeper into the city, moving from the vibrant green of the outer gardens to the serene, pearlescent core of the central island. The city hum grows stronger here, a resonant frequency that seems to tune the very air, making your teeth vibrate gently and your mind feel unusually clear and focused. You feel as if a lifetime of mental fog has been lifted, replaced by a sharp lucidity. You are brought into one of the spiraling towers, not through a crude doorway, but through an opening that irises open in the wall, like the pupil of an eye, seamlessly and silently closing behind you. Inside, the light is soft and diffuse, emanating from the walls themselves. There are no lamps, no fixtures, just a gentle ambient glow. The interior is a single vast chamber, filled with what look like crystalline trees growing from the floor. Their branches are intricate lattices of quartz-like material, pulsing with soft-colored light that flows through them like sap. Lemnians glide between these crystal growths, tending to them with focused attention, their own internal light shifting in response to the pulses from the crystals. This isn't a power plant in the way we would understand it. It's more like a living computer, a library, and a factory, all in one. The golden Lemnian guides you to one of the smaller crystal formations. It offers you a feeling, a query, a request to place your hand on the crystal surface. You hesitate for a moment, then comply. The crystal is smooth and warm, and the instant your palm makes contact, the city hum focuses into a single pure tone inside your head, and your mind is flooded with information, not in a chaotic, overwhelming way, but as a perfectly ordered stream of understanding. You are seeing Lemnian technology from the inside out, and it's a revelation that shatters every concept of engineering you have. They don't manufacture things, they cultivate them. They don't assemble parts, they persuade matter to grow into the desired form using sound, using harmonic frequencies. This is the secret of the city. It's a constant symphony of creation, a vibrational toolkit that can manipulate the physical world on a molecular level. They can grow a building like a seashell, coaxing minerals from the water and air to crystallize into complex programmable structures. The glowing pathways, the self-repairing walls, the silent iris doorways are not machines. They are organisms with a basic cellular intelligence, guided by the city's central resonance. You're witnessing a form of sonocrystallization, a fringe concept in modern physics, where sound waves can influence the formation of crystals, but on a scale so vast and precise it borders on divine power. Remember that black tablet, the one that started this whole journey. It wasn't forged or molded, it was grown in a crystalline matrix, sung into existence, a perfect vessel for information, designed to last for eternity. A mainstream historical fact is that the development of metallurgy, starting with copper, then bronze, then iron, was a critical step in human evolution. It allowed for better tools, stronger weapons, and more complex societies. Our entire history is defined by the metals we mastered: the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, but the Lemnians skipped that entire clumsy phase. Why hammer metal into shape when you can sing a crystal into being? Why build a disposable gadget when you can grow a permanent tool that is part of a living system? You see a Lemnian approach a larger crystal tree and emit a specific sequence of tonal thoughts. Its internal light flickers from blue to a vibrant violet, and a small object begins to form at the tip of a crystal branch, a sphere of light that solidifies into a handheld device, a tool for some purpose. You can't guess. It's grown on demand, and when it is no longer needed, it will be reabsorbed back into the crystal matrix, a perfect system of recycling with zero waste or pollution. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures had a more intuitive understanding of acoustics, citing the specific resonant frequencies of megalithic sites like Newgrange in Ireland or the burial chambers in the pyramids of Giza. These places seem to have been designed to amplify sound in very specific ways, though their purpose remains a mystery. Looking at this Lemnian technology, you realize those ancient sites might not have been for religious ceremonies in the way we think of them. They may have been crude attempts to replicate this lost science of harmonics, attempts by early humans to sing stone into power, just as they had been taught long ago. You pull your hand back from the crystal, the informational flow ceasing as the connection is broken. You look at your own hand, your clumsy five-fingered appendage that created technologies of fire and steel, and you feel a sense of profound inadequacy. Humanity has been shouting at the universe with its technology, crude explosions, and brute force. The Lemnians have been humming a quiet tune of creation all along. They have no need for mining, which scars the earth, no need for factories that choke the sky, no need for waste dumps to bury their mistakes. Their civilization is in complete equilibrium with their environment, a closed loop of elegant, sustainable creation that makes our own industrial revolution look like a child's temper tantrum in a sandbox, a very noisy and destructive one. At that, you now understand the silent grace of the city. It's the quiet confidence of a civilization that has mastered the fundamental music of the universe. They have no need for loud engines or clanking machinery, because their power is silent and omnipresent, woven into the very fabric of their world. You thought you were in a city, but you now realize you are inside a symphony, one that has been playing for thousands of years, and you are just beginning to hear the first few notes. The golden-hued Lemnian leads you out of the crystal tower back into the soft open air of the central island. It feels like stepping out of a university library into a vibrant city park, but the library contained the secrets of creation itself. Your mind is still buzzing from the influx of knowledge, trying to process the concept of a technology based on pure harmony. You are guided toward the very center of the city, to the base of the largest and most luminous of the spiraling towers, The hum here is so profound it's a physical presence, a blanket of pure resonant energy that seems to pass right through you, making you feel utterly transparent and insignificant, yet strangely energized. This central spire is the conductor's podium for the entire city symphony. At its base is a wide circular chamber open to the sky. The floor is a smooth, dark material that looks like polished obsidian, but you know it's not stone. It's a vast map, a real-time representation of the entire planet Earth, glowing with soft lines of light. You can see the continents, the oceans, the weather patterns, all displayed in a living, dynamic model that shifts and flows with mesmerizing grace. But there's more. The map is dotted with hundreds of tiny pulsing lights scattered across every continent, some in the deepest jungles, others on remote mountain peaks, a few even glowing faintly from beneath the ocean's surface. You feel the Lemnians' thought stream again, a gentle wave of explanation washing over you. These are not cities, these are outposts, beacons, way stations, a global network of small research stations established thousands of years before this central city even reached its full glory. The Lemnians were not isolationists hiding in their perfect city. They were planetary scientists, explorers, and perhaps caretakers. They had been studying the Earth for millennia, charting its climate, its geology, its evolving biosphere. From these discrete locations, your gaze is drawn to a cluster of lights in what you recognize as the Andes Mountains, another in the fertile plains of the Indus Valley, and one right where you first found the tablet in Mesopotamia, a place that would one day become Sumer. It's a staggering revelation. Mainstream history teaches that ancient civilizations developed in isolation. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Indus Valley civilization, the early Chinese dynasties, all supposedly sprang up independently, with only minimal contact. In their early stages, the idea of a global culture in 10,000 BCE is academic heresy. This map laid out at your feet shows that not only was there a global network, but it was run by a civilization so advanced that they would have seemed like gods to any primitive humans they encountered. You look closer at the map, and you can see faint lines of energy connecting these outposts, a subterranean or atmospheric network that allowed for instantaneous communication and transport between them, a system that makes our own internet look like two cans connected by a string. You recall a quirky historical tidbit about ley lines, a fringe concept popularized in the early 20th century, proposing that ancient sites around the world are aligned on straight geographical lines of mystical energy. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this as pseudoscience, a product of connecting random dots on a map, this glowing chart in front of you suggests that the core idea might have been a distant echo of forgotten truth, a memory of the Lemnians' own global energy grid. You can feel the purpose of this network. It wasn't for conquest or empire. It was for observation and preservation. They were monitoring the planet's vital signs, like doctors tending to a patient, and this patient, the Earth, was on the cusp of a major change. The end of the last ice age. The glaciers were retreating, the sea levels were rising, and the climate was shifting dramatically. The Lemnians were here to witness, and perhaps to gently guide the process. Historians still argue whether the synchronous rise of agriculture in multiple locations around the globe around 10,000 BCE was a coincidence driven by climate change or the result of cultural diffusion along nascent trade routes. This Lemnian map offers a third and far more radical explanation. It wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't trade. It was a deliberate plan, a project. The Lemnians were not just watching the world change, they were preparing to intervene, to plant the seeds of civilization in the fertile soil left behind by the retreating ice. They weren't colonizers. They were teachers, getting ready for their first class with a new and promising species that was just beginning to show signs of higher consciousness, a species known as Homo sapiens. You look at the pulsing light over the Fertile Crescent, and you understand Sumer wasn't the beginning. It was a carefully chosen location, a perfect incubator for a fledgling civilization, a place where the Lemnians could conduct their grand experiment in a controlled environment. The full weight of this realization settles upon you. Human history, our history, is a lie, not a malicious lie, but a lie of omission. We have been looking at a single chapter and calling it the whole book. We thought we were the authors of our own story, but now you see that we had a silent co-author, a guiding hand that shaped our first steps without us ever knowing it. The great cities of antiquity were not the spontaneous creations of human genius alone. They were built on a foundation of forgotten knowledge, echoes of a song sung by a people made of light who had mastered the music of the spheres and who had been watching us from the shadows for a very, very long time. The grand planetary map at your feet shimmers, and with a subtle mental nudge from your Lemnian guide, the perspective shifts. You are no longer looking at a global network. You are zooming in on a single point of light in the heart of what would one day be Europe. The world of the Green Sahara dissolves, and you find yourself standing in a dense primeval forest, a world of towering oaks and thick undergrowth. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and wood smoke. It is thousands of years before the rise of Sumer, long before the first farmer ever planted a seed. You are back in the deep past of the hunter-gatherer, a time we often imagine as brutish and short, but which had its own complex rhythm and deep connection to the natural world. You are invisible, a ghost in time, observing a scene that no historian has ever witnessed. You see a small group of early humans, a family clan, gathered around a crackling fire. Their faces are weathered, their bodies lean and muscular, covered in animal hides. Their hair is long and matted. They are your distant ancestors, people of the Paleolithic. They are butchering a deer with flint knives, their hands working with an practiced efficiency born of necessity. Their language is a series of guttural sounds and complex gestures, perfectly adequate for their needs, but a universe away from the silent resonant speech of the Lemnians. They are intelligent, their eyes sharp and aware, but their consciousness is rooted in the immediate, in survival, in the hunt, the fire, the family. The world of abstract thought, a philosophy of science, is as alien to them as the surface of the moon. This is a snapshot of humanity in its natural state, a successful and resilient species, perfectly adapted to its environment. It's a mainstream historical fact that for the vast majority of our species' existence we were hunter-gatherers. Agriculture is a very recent invention, appearing only about 12,000 years ago. A mere 5% of the time modern humans have been on the planet. For 200,000 years the scene of fire and flint was our reality. Then you see it, a figure emerges silently from between the ancient trees. It's a Lemnian, one of the planetary observers from a nearby outpost. Its internal light is dimmed to a soft muted gray, a deliberate attempt to appear less startling. It moves with its characteristic liquid grace, a stark contrast to the earthy movements of the humans. The family clan freezes, their flint knives held defensively. Their grunts turn to low growls of alarm. They see a spirit, a forest demon, something that does not belong in their world. This is the moment of first contact, not a grand arrival of starships, but a quiet encounter in a forgotten forest. The Lemnian stops at a respectful distance. It makes no move that could be perceived as threatening. It simply stands there, a pillar of calm in a sea of primitive fear. It raises one of its slender hands, and a soft golden light emanates from its palm, not a weapon, but a gentle warmth that pushes back the chill of the forest. The humans stare, mesmerized by the light, their fear slowly being replaced by a profound sense of awe. You feel the Lemnian's intention, not as a thought stream, for there is no mind here evolved enough to receive it, but as a pure wave of empathetic broadcast. It is projecting feelings of peace, of calm, of non-aggression. It is speaking to their primal brains, to the emotional core that predates language and logic. You are reminded of a quirky and slightly unsettling fringe theory known as the stoned ape hypothesis, which suggests that early humans' cognitive leap forward was triggered by consuming psychedelic mushrooms found in nature. The theory posits that these experiences opened up new neural pathways, leading to art, religion, and abstract thought. Watching the Lemnian's gentle light show, you wonder if the truth is even stranger. Perhaps the myths of visions and communications from the spirit world were not drug-induced hallucinations, but fragmented memories of encounters, like this one with beings who could directly influence consciousness. The clan leader, the strongest of the hunters, takes a hesitant step forward. He is a man of courage, his life a testament to facing down predators, like cave bears and saber-toothed cats. But this is a different kind of fear of the unknown. The Lemnian lowers its hand and the light fades. It then does something extraordinary. It looks at the half-butchered deer, then at the fire, and then it looks at a patch of wild wheat growing at the edge of the clearing. It projects a simple sequence of images, not into their minds, but into the space between them, like a subtle shimmering hologram, a psychic picture book. It shows the wheat seed being planted in the ground. It shows the sun and the rain. It shows the wheat growing tall and golden. It shows the grain being harvested, ground into flour, and baked into bread over the fire. A concept so simple to us, so revolutionary to them, it would be like showing a medieval peasant a functioning smartphone. Historians still argue whether the transition to agriculture was a choice or a necessity, a brilliant invention that gave us food security, or a trap that led to social hierarchy, disease, and warfare. From the perspective of these hunters, the idea of staying in one place and waiting for food to grow would likely seem absurd and foolish. Why would you do that when the forest provides everything you need? The Lemnian holds the vision for a long moment, planting an idea, a seed not in the ground, but in the fertile soil of a human mind. It's not a command, it's a suggestion, a demonstration of a possibility. The clan leader watches, his brow furrowed in concentration. He doesn't understand the specifics, but he grasps the essential message: a new way to get food, a new relationship with the world. The Lemnian then turns and silently melts back into the forest, leaving the family clan staring at the wild wheat with a new and profound curiosity. They don't know it yet, but they have just been given the foundational cornerstone of civilization. They have been touched by their teachers, and their world will never be the same. The scene in the primeval European forest fades like a dream at dawn, and you are back in the heart of the Lemnian city, standing before the glowing planetary map. The vision of that first quiet lesson hangs in your mind, a profound and unsettling revelation. The Lemnians were not just observers, they were active agents of change. Their touch on humanity is light and as powerful as a single drop of rain that starts a flood. You feel the serene thought stream of your Lemnian guide, once more expanding on what you have just witnessed. The encounter in the forest was not an isolated event, it was the beginning of a coordinated global initiative, a project of staggering ambition and patience. They called the Uplift Project, a term your mind provides as the closest English equivalent to their complex, resonant concept. The goal was simple in theory, but monumental in practice: to gently guide Homo sapiens out of the long twilight of the Stone Age and into the dawn of civilization without revealing their own existence. The Lemnians had studied humanity for millennia, watching from their discreet outposts. They saw a species with immense potential, a unique combination of resilience, adaptability, and a burgeoning creative spark. They saw in those primitive hunters and gatherers the capacity for art, music, and abstract thought. But it was a potential that was shackled by the brutal demands of day-to-day survival. So they made a decision, a choice that would alter the destiny of the planet. They decided to become teachers, to give humanity the tools it needed to build a new world. The first and most critical lesson was agriculture, as you saw in the forest. By teaching humanity to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, they would free them from the endless cycle of migration and hunting, giving them the one resource they needed most to develop culture: time to think, time to build, time to wonder. But the lessons didn't stop with farming. The map before you lights up again, showing different outposts glowing as you are shown more psychic snapshots of the Uplift Project in action. In a valley in the Andes, a Lemnian observer teaches a local tribe the basics of terraced farming, creating agricultural platforms on the steep mountainsides, a technique that would one day become the hallmark of the Inca Empire in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Another Lemnian shows a coastal community how to build stable ocean-going canoes, not by giving them blueprints, but by implanting the resonant idea of a double outrigger design allowing them to explore and settle the vast Pacific Islands. This echoes a mainstream historical fact: the sudden and rapid expansion of Austronesian peoples across the Pacific starting around 3000 BC is one of the most remarkable migration events in human history. Their navigational skills and boat-building technology seemingly appearing with astonishing sophistication. The Lemnians were the silent navigators who whispered the first sea charts into the minds of those early sailors, but technology was only part of the curriculum. The most important lessons were abstract: the concept of law, for instance. In a world governed by brute strength and tribal instinct, the Lemnians introduced the idea of impartial justice, of rules that apply to everyone equally. They would appear in dreams or visions to nascent tribal leaders as wise ancestral spirits, suggesting codes of conduct based on fairness and reciprocity, not divine command. These whispers would over centuries evolve into the first legal codes, like the famous Code of Uarnemu from Sumer. Predating the Code of Hammurabi, these laws weren't handed down on stone tablets by an angry god. They were gentle suggestions from an invisible teacher. Then there was astronomy. The Lemnians taught humanity to read the stars, not for astrology or divination, but for practical purposes, for creating calendars, to track the seasons, for planting and harvesting, and for navigation on land and sea. They guided the construction of the first simple astronomical observatory, circles of wood or stone aligned to the solstices and equinoxes. These early calendars were the first step toward a scientific understanding of the cosmos, a way of seeing the universe as an ordered, predictable system, not a chaotic and terrifying realm of gods and monsters. Historians still argue whether the astronomical alignments found in many ancient structures, like the Goseck Circle in Germany, are evidence of sophisticated prehistoric science, or just coincidental. The Uplift Project provides the answer: they were the first blackboards of humanity's primary school education. You are reminded of a quirky fringe belief in cargo cults, where isolated indigenous tribes who encounter advanced technology, like airplanes, during wartime begin to worship the planes and build straw replicas of them, hoping to attract more cargo from the sky. Our own ancient history, you realize, might be a kind of cargo cult on a global scale. We built stone circles to mimic the astronomical knowledge of the Lemnians. We created gods in their image. We turned their scientific lessons into rigid religious doctrines, all in a desperate attempt to recapture the magic of that first contact, without ever understanding the true nature of our teachers. The Lemnians were careful. They knew that revealing themselves directly would be a disaster. It would turn them into gods, creating a culture of dependency and worship instead of one of self-reliant discovery. So they worked from the shadows, their influence, a gentle nudge, a whispered suggestion, a cleverly planted idea. They were the ultimate helicopter parents for an entire species, always watching, always guiding, but desperately wanting their child to think it was figuring everything out on its own. The Uplift Project was an act of breathtaking patience and restraint, a gamble that humanity, once given the basic tools, would eventually find its own way to the stars. And as you look at the glowing map, you see them choosing the perfect place to bring all these lessons together to create the first great pilot program for civilization, a place where the conditions were just right for a cultural explosion, a place in the fertile plains between two rivers, a place called Sumer. The glowing map of the world fades, and you are once again transported through time and space, your consciousness tethered to the silent narrative of the Lemnian guide. This time you find yourself standing on a vast flat plain under a relentless sun. The air is thick with the smell of wet silt and the buzz of insects. Two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, flow sluggishly toward a distant sea, carving a green ribbon of life through an otherwise arid landscape. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, thousands of years ago, before the rise of the great cities that would define its history. You are witnessing the birth of the world's first schoolhouse. you see small scattered villages of mud brick huts, clusters of human settlement clinging to the banks of the rivers. These are the descendants of the hunter-gatherers you saw earlier, their ancestors, having been gently nudged toward agriculture for generations. They are the Ubaid people, the Proto-Sumerians. They have mastered the basics of farming and irrigation, digging small canals to water their fields of barley and wheat. But their society is still simple, egalitarian, and small-scale. This place was chosen by the Lamanians with meticulous care. It was the perfect laboratory for the next phase of the uplift project. The land was incredibly fertile, but required constant effort to manage. The rivers provided life, but also brought unpredictable and devastating floods. This environment would challenge the nascent civilization, forcing them to innovate, to cooperate, and to organize on a scale never seen before. It was a crucible designed to forge a new kind of society. The Lamanian presence here is more concentrated than in the scattered outposts you witnessed before. A small permanent team is stationed in a hidden subterranean enclave, their influence more direct, yet still carefully veiled. They don't walk among the people as shimmering beings. Instead, they use their resonant abilities to influence dreams, to plant ideas, and to subtly guide the most promising individuals. You watch as a village elder struggles to figure out how to divide the harvest fairly among the families. That night, in a dream, a Lamanian whispers the concept of a standardized unit of measure, a bushel of barley, a clay token to represent it. The next morning, the elder wakes with a brilliant new idea, a system of accounting that seems to have come from his own mind. This is the origin of the bureaucratic mindset, a joke we often make about endless paperwork, but it was a revolutionary leap in social organization. You see a clever farmer staring at the star-filled night sky. A Lamanian feeds her a vision of the celestial dance, the pattern of Venus's movements, the 360-day cycle of the sun. It's not presented as divine revelation, but as a pattern, a puzzle to be solved. This whispered knowledge becomes the basis for the Sumerian calendar and their incredibly complex sexagesimal base 60 counting system, which we still use today for our minutes and our circles, a mainstream historical fact that has always puzzled historians. Due to its unusual complexity for an early civilization, it wasn't invented, it was taught, a gift from a silent teacher who understood the elegant mathematics of the cosmos. The floods are the greatest challenge. The Lamanians used their subtle influence to guide the people to build dikes and larger, more complex canal networks, a project that requires hundreds of people from different villages to work together. This forces the creation of a new social structure, a leadership class to organize the labor, a priesthood to sanctify the work, and a system of laws to manage disputes. It is the birth of the city-state, a complex organism of human cooperation born from the necessity of taming the two rivers. The city of Eridu, considered by the Sumerians themselves to be the very first city, rises from the mud flats. Its temple, dedicated to the water god Enki, is built and rebuilt over centuries, each time more elaborate than the last. The Lamanians watch with quiet satisfaction as their students learn to build on a monumental scale, learning the principles of architecture and engineering through trial and error, guided by whispered insights. You are reminded of a quirky fringe idea concerning the Sumerian king list, a cuneiform tablet that lists all the kings of Sumer and their incredibly long reigns before a great flood, some reigning for tens of thousands of years. Historians dismiss these early kings as purely mythical figures, but you now see a different possibility. Perhaps these weren't human kings. Perhaps they were distorted memories of the long-lived Lamanian teachers themselves, their impossibly long tenures condensed into the myth of immortal god-kings who descended from heaven. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians were an indigenous people who developed in Mesopotamia or migrants who brought their culture with them. The truth you now see is that they were both. They were indigenous people whose culture was deliberately cultivated and accelerated by an outside influence. The Fertile Crescent was not the cradle of civilization. It was a carefully designed and brilliantly successful educational experiment. The Lemnians provided the curriculum, the essential concepts of mathematics, astronomy, law, and large-scale organization, but they let humanity write the essays and take the tests. They allowed for human creativity, for ambition, for failure, and for all the messy, unpredictable glory of our species to flourish. They knew they couldn't just give us a perfect city like their own home in the Sahara. We had to build it ourselves, with our own hands, our own sweat, and our own mud. The pride of that achievement had to be ours alone. Sumer was the first graduation ceremony of the Uplift Project, a place where humanity proved it had learned the basic lessons and was ready for the next stage of its development. A legacy was being built not just in mud, brick, and cuneiform, but in the very consciousness of a species ready to step onto the world stage, all while the silent teachers began to plan their slow and deliberate retreat from the world. Your perspective shifts from the grand overview of Sumer as a schoolhouse to a more intimate human level. You are now walking through the bustling streets of Uruk, one of the world's first true cities. Several generations after the initial seeds were planted by the Lemnians, the experiment is a resounding success, but it is also spinning out of control in ways the Lemnians had perhaps not fully anticipated. The city is a chaotic, vibrant explosion of human energy. It's loud, a cacophony of merchants hawking their wares, children shouting in play, the bleating of sheep being herded through the narrow, unpaved streets, and the constant murmur of 1,000 conversations. It smells of baking bread, of livestock, of human sweat, and of the slightly metallic tang of the nearby river. It is messy, gloriously alive, and utterly human, a stark contrast to the serene, silent perfection of the Lemnian city in the green Sahara. The people of Uruk are proud, resourceful, and deeply religious. Their world is populated by a pantheon of powerful and often fickle gods who control the sky, the earth, the water, and every aspect of their lives. They build massive ziggurat-step pyramids of mud brick at the heart of their cities to honor these gods, to appease them with sacrifices, and to feel closer to the divine. You stand before the great ziggurat of Uruk, dedicated to Inanna, the goddess of love and war, and you see with a sudden, heartbreaking clarity how the beautiful science of the Lemnians has been warped and misunderstood by the human mind. You witness a group of priests chanting hymns to Enlil, the god of wind, air, and storms. They beg him to send gentle winds for their sails and to spare them from his destructive wrath. You feel a faint echo of the original Lemnian lesson, a simple meteorological principle about atmospheric pressure and weather patterns, taught through a guided vision centuries ago, a piece of pure science that has been transformed into a personality, a moody and powerful deity. The Lemnians didn't have gods. They had physics, they had biology, they had astronomy, but to the human mind, which seeks agency and narrative in the chaos of the universe, these impersonal forces were given faces, names, and epic backstories. The pure data was corrupted into myth. The concept of the Lemnian city's resonant hum, a scientific principle of harmonic energy, became the divine word of a creator god that brought order to the cosmos. The Lemnians' ability to manipulate life and grow biological structures was transformed into the power of a fertility goddess who could make the crops grow, or a healing god who could mend broken bones. A mainstream historical fact is that the pantheons of early civilizations like Sumer and Egypt were deeply tied to the natural world, each god representing a specific force or phenomenon. This is often seen as a primitive attempt to explain the world, but you now see it as a degraded memory, a system of knowledge that lost its scientific core and retained only its allegorical shell. You remember a quirky fringe theory about etymology, suggesting that the biblical word Elohim, which is translated as God in the Old Testament, is actually a plural noun, sometimes interpreted as the mighty ones or the shining ones. Looking at the Lemnians, it's easy to see how a collective of serene, glowing beings could over millennia of retelling become a pantheon of gods, or a singular plural deity. The process is a bit like a cosmic game of telephone, a message whispered from a being of light to a dreaming human, retold around a fire, passed down through generations, carved into clay. by a scribe, interpreted by a priest, until the original meaning is completely lost, replaced by a story that is more emotionally resonant, even if it's factually wrong. Historians still argue whether the development of organized religion was a tool for social control, a genuine spiritual awakening, or a neurological byproduct of our pattern-seeking brains. From your vantage point, you can see it was all three, but it began with a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of a lesson taught by a teacher who was too alien to be understood on his own terms. You watch a young scribe painstakingly pressing wedge-shaped marks into a soft clay tablet. He is recording a story about the great hero Gilgamesh and his quest for immortality, a journey to the bottom of the sea to find a special plant that restores youth. The story is a masterpiece of early literature, a profound meditation on life, death, and the human condition, but you feel the ghost of the original Lemnian input, a simple lesson about biology, about cellular degradation, about the finite nature of an organism's lifespan, a piece of scientific truth that has been woven into a heroic epic. The Lemnians had tried to give humanity science, but humanity had turned it into poetry. They had offered universal principles, but we had created local gods. They had tried to make us students, but we insisted on being worshippers. This was the great unintended consequence of the Uplift Project, a consequence the Lemnians watched with a kind of gentle, sad resignation. They saw that humanity wasn't yet ready for the unvarnished truth of a purely scientific cosmos. They needed stories, they needed gods, they needed myths to mediate their relationship with the universe. The schoolhouse had become a cathedral, and the teachers were slowly becoming ghosts, their true nature fading into the jeweled cages of legend. The vibrant chaos of Uruk dissolves into silence, and you are back in the heart of the Lemnian city. The transition is a physical shock, like stepping from a noisy rock concert into a soundproof room. The serene perfection that once felt so alien and impressive now feels fragile, poignant, beautiful in its impending doom. The city's hum is still present, a constant resonant frequency, but you can now detect a subtle minor key woven into its melody, a quiet thrum of sorrow that reverberates through the crystal architecture and the very air you breathe. Your Lemnian guide directs your attention back to the massive planetary map on the floor of the central spire. The map is no longer just displaying the network of outposts. It is now a vast and complex meteorological model. The glowing lines show ocean currents, wind patterns, and atmospheric moisture levels in real time. But you are not looking at the present. You are watching a projection, a simulation of the next few thousand years running in fast forward, and it is showing a catastrophe of planetary scale. You watch as the vibrant green that covers North Africa begins to fade. The life-giving West African monsoon, which has watered this land for millennia, is shown to falter, its rain bands shifting south year by year, century by century. The great Tamanrasset River, the lifeblood of this city and this civilization, begins to shrink, its tributaries drying up, becoming seasonal streams, then vanishing altogether. The lush savanna withers, turning to arid scrubland, then to parched, cracked earth, and finally to endless waves of sand. The simulation ends with the city. You are standing in a ghost set of concentric rings buried beneath a sea of dunes under a merciless sun. This is not a possibility. This is a certainty. The Lemnians, with their perfect understanding of planetary science, knew this day was coming for a very long time. They have been living on borrowed time in a paradise with an expiration date. The great thirst is approaching, and it is unstoppable. The end of the African humid period is a known event in Earth's history, a mainstream historical fact, confirmed by climate proxies like lake sediments and pollen records. Around 5,500 years ago, the Sahara Desert, which had been a vibrant ecosystem of life, rapidly transformed into the hyper-arid desert we know today. It was one of the most dramatic climate shifts of the last 10,000 years, a turning point that had a profound impact on human migration and the rise of civilizations like Egypt along the Nile. The Lemnians weren't just victims of this change, they were its most knowledgeable witnesses. They saw it coming not as a vague threat, but as a precise and inalterable climatic calculation. Their home was doomed. You can feel their collective consciousness, a vast ocean of calm acceptance, tinged with a deep and abiding sadness. There is no panic, no frantic search for a solution. They understand that their own technology, which is based on harmony with nature, cannot be used to dominate it. They cannot force the rains to return. They cannot command the planet's climate. To bend to their will to do so would be a violation of their most fundamental principles, a kind of technological violence that is antithetical to their entire existence. They can sing a crystal into being, but they cannot sing a storm across a continent. It is a moment of profound cosmic irony, a lesson in the limits of power, even for a civilization that borders on the divine. You are reminded of a quirky and persistent theme in mythology. Across the world, the story of a lost golden age, a paradise, like the Garden of Eden, from which humanity was exiled, a land of plenty that was lost to some great catastrophe. These myths are often interpreted as allegories for the loss of innocence or the transition from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to the hardships of agriculture. But standing here, you see another possibility. They are fragmented cultural memories of a real place, a real time, when the world's greatest desert was a garden, and that garden died, taking a wondrous civilization with it. The expulsion from Eden wasn't a punishment from a god. It was a forced evacuation ahead of a climate disaster. Historians still argue whether the desertification of the Sahara was a gradual process that unfolded over many centuries, or a shockingly rapid collapse that occurred over just a few decades. A climatic tipping point that, once crossed, could not be reversed. The Lemnians knew the answer. They watched it in their simulations, like doctors watching a terminal diagnosis unfold with terrifying clarity. The knowledge of this impending end has shaped their entire uplift project. They knew they could not stay on Earth forever. Their time here was always finite. Their role was not to be permanent kings, but temporary teachers. Their perfect city was not a final home, but a beautiful temporary campus. Now, with the timeline of their world's demise firmly established, their purpose shifts. The lessons for humanity must be accelerated, and a new project must begin, one focused not on teaching, but on preservation, on creating a legacy that could survive the coming drought and the long millennia of human forgetfulness. They must prepare for their departure, a carefully managed withdrawal from the world stage, leaving behind not just fledgling civilizations, but a series of time capsules that might one day lead a future humanity back to the truth. The serene city around you now feels like a beautiful museum on its last day before it closes its doors. Forever the inhabitants move with their usual grace, but there is a new urgency to their quiet work, a sense of a great task that must be completed before the waters recede and the sands sweep in to claim their silent crystal towers. The simulation of the Sahara's encroaching death fades from the planetary map, leaving you with a profound sense of vicarious loss. The Lemnian city, with its quiet hum and pearlescent towers, feels like a funeral home for an entire world, a place of beauty and sorrow intertwined. You feel the shift in the collective consciousness of the Lemnians, a transition from the long patient work of teaching to the more focused urgent task of departure. Their decision is not about escape. They are not fleeing a dying world in a panic. They have the technology to leave Earth, to travel to the stars, if they so chose. You feel a flicker of that knowledge, a sense of starships grown from crystal and powered by harmonic resonance that could traverse the void with ease. But that is not their plan. Their connection to this planet is too deep, too fundamental. They are a product of Earth's unique biosphere, a parallel evolution that is as tied to this world as humanity is. Their destiny is not in the stars, it is in the soil, the water, the very air of this planet. Their withdrawal is not an escape, it is a transformation, a strategic retreat into a different state of being, a plan to leave a permanent legacy rather than a physical empire. The Uplift Project had been about giving humanity the tools to build its own house. Now they needed to leave behind the blueprints of the universe, for when humanity was finally ready to read them, it was an act of incredible long-term thinking, a bet placed across millennia, a final gift To their unruly and promising students, you can feel the quiet debates within their collective mind, not angry arguments, but a collaborative flow of ideas and possibilities. What is the best way to leave a message that can survive the rise and fall of civilizations, the shifting of languages, the erosion of stone, and the corruption of memory? They could not leave a library of black tablets like the one you found. Those would be too easily lost, misinterpreted, or dismissed as impossible hoaxes. They needed something more profound, more resilient, and more deeply embedded in the world itself. The plan they formulate is twofold: a physical legacy and a biological one, a message for the mind and a message for the very cells of humanity. The first part of the plan is to guide the creation of massive, enduring structures around the world, monuments that would be so large, so mathematically precise, and so difficult to build that they would scream a message of intelligence across the ages. They would be giant silent question marks on a landscape designed to puzzle and provoke future generations into asking the right questions. These would be the world's first and most important time capsules. This is a familiar concept, a mainstream historical fact, that megalithic structures, like the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge in England, and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, show a surprising degree of astronomical and mathematical sophistication for their time. Göbekli Tepe, in particular, dating back to around 9,500 BC, is a complete anomaly, built by what were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers, yet featuring massive carved stone pillars that predate pottery and writing by thousands of years. These sites weren't just tombs or temples in the way we understand them. They were knowledge repositories built under Lemnian guidance. Their alignments would encode astronomical data, the precession of the equinoxes, the cycles of the sun and moon. Their dimensions would encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. Their very existence would be a testament to a lost age of high science, a puzzle box waiting for a key. The second part of the plan is far more subtle and infinitely more audacious. It is a legacy not of stone, but of life. They had studied human genetics for thousands of years from their hidden outposts, understanding our DNA far better than we did. They saw our genetic code not just as a blueprint for a biological machine, but as an incredible information storage medium, a library with billions of letters that could carry a message silently through generations, hidden in the so-called junk DNA that makes up the vast majority of our genome. You are reminded of a quirky fringe area of research that speculates that parts of our non-coding DNA might contain a structured signal, a message from an extraterrestrial intelligence. This idea is usually relegated to the far edges of science fiction, but standing here you see the truth is even stranger. The message is not from the stars, it's from our own planet's forgotten past. The Lemnians plan to encode their most important knowledge, their understanding of physics, consciousness, the resonant nature of the universe itself, directly into the human genome, a dormant file, waiting for a password, a final revelation to be unlocked when humanity reached a sufficient level of scientific and spiritual maturity. Historians still argue whether human evolution is still ongoing or if it has largely stopped. For our species, you now see a third possibility, that our evolution was deliberately and subtly altered in the deep past, not just to nudge our consciousness, but to turn us into living archives, walking libraries, carrying the ultimate legacy of our lost teachers. This was their solution to the problem of their own extinction. They would not survive as a physical race in their magnificent city, but they would survive as an idea, as a seed of knowledge planted in the most fertile ground they could find, the very essence of humanity itself. It was a plan of breathtaking scope, a final act of trust in their chaotic students, a belief that one day we would be wise enough to read the message they left buried in our own blood and bone. The quiet hum of the city seems to change again, the sorrowful note replaced by one of grim purpose and transcendent hope. They had a plan, they had a legacy to build. The clock was ticking, and the sands were coming. The vision of the Lemnians' grand plan, a legacy of stone and gene, solidifies in your mind, and you are once again a silent observer. Drifting through time to witness its implementation, the world blurs, and you find yourself on a windswept plateau in what will one day be called Turkey. It is nearly 12,000 years ago, and the air is alive with the sound of chipping stone and the grunts of human effort. This is Göbekli Tepe, the place that has baffled modern archaeologists. A vast temple complex built by people who shouldn't have been able to build it. But they are not alone. You see the Lemnian presence here not as physical beings, but as a guiding intelligence. They move through the work site as shimmering apparitions of light visible only to the shaman priests. The leaders of this hunter-gatherer society, the Lemnians, are the architects, the engineers, providing the templates for the massive T-shaped pillars and the complex animal carvings that adorn them. They are using their resonant abilities to show the builders where to quarry the giant monoliths, how to transport them, and how to erect them with a precision that seems impossible for people who lack even basic pottery, let alone complex machinery. The human builders are doing the physical labor, their muscles straining to pull ropes and chip away at stone with primitive tools, but the design, the sacred geometry, is not their own. You watch as a Lemnian projects a holographic star map into the mind of a priest, showing him how to align the central pillars to the rising point of the star Sirius, a silent lesson in celestial mechanics that will be frozen in stone for millennia. This is a mainstream historical fact. The astronomical alignments at Göbekli Tepe are undeniably precise, suggesting a far deeper understanding of the cosmos than was previously thought possible for that era. It was a university of stone built before the first city was ever conceived. Your perspective shifts, whisking you across the globe to the Salisbury Plain in ancient Britain. Thousands of years later, a different group of people, a different culture, but the same guiding hand is at work. You see the construction of Stonehenge not as a single event, but as a project that spanned over 1,000 years, guided by successive generations of Lemnian-influenced Druidic priests. The massive sarsen stones and the smaller bluestones, brought from a quarry hundreds of miles away, are moved and placed with an eerie precision. The Lemnians are teaching the locals about acoustics, about resonant frequencies. They are helping them build not just a calendar of stone, but a massive musical instrument. A machine designed to amplify specific sonic vibrations and perhaps to interact with the Earth's own energy grid. A crude but powerful echo of the technology used in their own dying city. You are reminded of a quirky fringe theory about acoustic levitation, the idea that sound can be used to lift heavy objects. Modern experiments have achieved this on a very small scale, but ancient stories from around the world speak of priests and magicians moving massive stones with the power of sound or chanting. Looking at the construction of Stonehenge, you realize this might not be myth, but a memory of a real technology taught by the Lemnians, a simplified version of their own harmonic science, shared with their human students to help them build these incredible legacy structures. The work is not limited to Europe. You see Lemnian influence in the massive earthworks of North America, like the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. Its form a perfect representation of a celestial constellation. You see it in the early designs for the pyramids in Egypt, which began as simple mastaba but were guided to become colossal repositories of mathematical and astronomical data. Their very dimensions, encoding the size of the Earth and the speed of light, for anyone with the knowledge to decipher them. And you see it in the terrifyingly precise stonework of sites like Puma Punku in Bolivia, where massive andesite blocks are cut with laser-like precision and fitted together in complex, interlocking shapes, a style of construction that baffles modern engineers. Even with our advanced tools, the local Aymara legends speak of these structures being built in a single night by giants using the power of sound. A story that now feels less like a fable and more like a distorted eyewitness account. Historians still argue whether a mother culture like Atlantis was responsible for the similarities seen in ancient megalithic sites around the world. The answer is yes. And no, there wasn't a human mother culture, but there was a single teaching tradition, a global faculty of Lemnian professors, guiding their various human students to build their own unique versions of these knowledge time capsules. Each site was a different chapter in a global textbook of stone. The mathematics were the same, the astronomical data was the same, but the artistic expression, the cultural flavor, was unique to the people who built it. The Lemnians were not creating a monolithic world culture. They were simply ensuring that the core truths of the universe were preserved in a format that was both universal and enduring. They were building a library with mountains for books. Each megalithic site was a silent sentinel, a beacon left behind by a vanishing race, a challenge to their future descendants to become smart enough to read the message written in the language of stars and stone. They were puzzles designed to last for an eternity, waiting for a species to evolve that was clever enough not just to marvel at them, but to understand them, and to ask the most important question of all: who were the librarians? The monumental stone structures of the ancient world fade from your view, their silent message echoing across the millennia. You have seen the first part of the Lemnian legacy, a physical library of rock and starlight. Now your Lemnian guide draws your consciousness inward to witness the second and far more intimate part of their plan, the biological legacy. You find yourself not in a place, but in a state of perception, a microscopic viewpoint, floating in the inner space of a human body. It is the time of Sumer again. The great schoolhouse is thriving, and the Lemnians are preparing for their final departure. You are witnessing one of their most profound and ethically complex interventions. You are inside the body of a young Sumerian woman chosen for her health and her strong genetic lineage. She is sleeping peacefully, unaware of the cosmic surgery being performed on her very essence. A Lemnian observer stands by her bedside, not physically present in the room, but connected to her on a quantum level, its consciousness interacting directly with her biology. Its hand is raised, its internal light focused into a single coherent beam of resonant energy that passes harmlessly through her skin and into her cells. This is not a crude physical procedure. It is a form of genetic engineering performed with harmonic frequencies, a targeted evolution guided by thought. You zoom down into the nucleus of one of her cells, into the tightly coiled double helix of her DNA. You see the long strands of adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, the four letters of the genetic alphabet that write the story of life. The vast majority of this code seems to be inactive, a long, repetitive string of what modern biologists would label junk DNA. A term that reflects our own ignorance more than its actual function. It is a mainstream historical fact that over 98% of the human genome is non-coding, meaning it doesn't directly create protein. Scientists are still discovering the complex regulatory roles of this dark matter of the genome, but much of its purpose remains a profound mystery. The Lemnians' resonant energy is focused on these non-coding regions. It is not cutting and pasting genes in the clumsy way our own geneticists are just learning to do. It is activating dormant sequences and delicately weaving a new pattern into the helical structure. It is writing a book in the margins of a life. It is a process of incredible subtlety, like a master musician retuning a single string on a vast piano to create a new harmonic potential. You feel the information being encoded. It's not just data, it's a conceptual language. It's the core of Lemnian science, their understanding of resonance, of consciousness, of the interconnectedness of the universe. It's the key to their technology, their philosophy, their very being, all translated into the chemical language of DNA. It is a compressed file of immense size, a message in a bottle thrown into the ocean of human heredity, designed to be carried silently and invisibly from parent to child for 100 generations or 1,000. You are reminded of a quirky and controversial fringe idea known as morphic resonance, a hypothesis proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake. It suggests that there is a collective memory in nature, that species tune into that habits and knowledge can be inherited through a non-local field. This idea is rejected by mainstream science, but watching the Lemnian at work, you see a possible mechanism for it. They are creating a biological receiver for a future signal, a dormant genetic antenna that will one day be able to tune into a greater cosmic understanding. The process is repeated across the globe in every population that has been part of the uplift project. A subtle genetic key is planted in a handful of individuals in the Fertile Crescent in the Indus Valley, in the Andes, in the Nile Delta, a synchronized and secret inoculation of knowledge. This is done with the utmost care to ensure it causes no harm, no immediate changes to the human phenotype. It is a time-release capsule of cosmic proportions, set to open only when the species has reached a certain level of technological and intellectual maturity, when they finally develop the tools to read their own genetic code. Historians still argue about the nature of genius and savantism, the sudden appearance of individuals like Ramanujan in mathematics or Mozart in music, who seem to possess an innate knowledge that far exceeds their education and experience. Perhaps these are not random mutations. Perhaps they are the first stirrings of this dormant Lemnian library, the first few files accidentally decrypting themselves in a mind that is uniquely receptive. You realized the chilling genius of this plan. The stone monuments could be destroyed, misinterpreted, or ignored, but the genetic legacy is almost impossible to erase as long as humanity survives. The message survives, with it hidden in plain sight. Within every one of us, we are the library. We are the time capsules. The Lemnians were not just our teachers, they were our editors, making a final subtle revision to the book of humanity before sending it to the publisher. The sleeping Sumerian woman sighs in her sleep, her dreams filled with fleeting images of spiraling towers and cities of light. She will wake in the morning and remember nothing, but she will pass on a secret to her children and her children's children, a secret so profound that it will sleep in their blood and bone for thousands of years, waiting for the day when her distant descendants look into a microscope and find a message from their forgotten gods. With the legacies of stone and gene now firmly in place, the final act of the Lemnian drama begins. Your perspective pulls back from the microscopic world of DNA and returns to the grand city of concentric rings in the green Sahara. It is centuries later, and the world has changed. The fledgling civilizations in Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley are beginning to stand on their own feet, writing their own histories, forgetting their teachers. The climate projections the Lemnians made so long ago are no longer simulations, they are a creeping reality. The great thirst has arrived. The air that was once soft and humid is now dry and sharp. The vibrant green of the savanna is receding like a slow tide, replaced by a pale and thirsty yellow. The great Tamanrasset River is a shadow of its former self, its flow diminished, its banks widening into sandy flats. The city's outer rings, which once held lush hydroponic gardens, are now barren and cracked. Their glowing pathways dimmed, their crystalline structures beginning to lose their luster. The city's hum, the constant song of creation, has grown faint, a whisper instead of a symphony. It is a dying paradise, a beautiful machine running out of power. The Lemnians move through their fading city with the same serene grace, but there is a palpable sense of finality in their movements. They are shutting down their world piece by piece, with the careful deliberation of monks performing a sacred ritual. The great crystal trees in the central towers are being put to sleep, their light fading from vibrant colors to a soft uniform white, then to a gentle gray, and finally to darkness. The iris doorways seal themselves one last time, becoming seamless parts of the walls. The living architecture is being rendered inert, turned from a dynamic organism into a static monument. They are not destroying their city, they are putting it into hibernation, a deep and profound sleep from which it may never awaken. It is a heartbreaking process to watch a civilization of unimaginable beauty and wisdom willingly turning off its own lights. You witness the last of the Lemnians gathering in the central spire around the now dark planetary map. They are fewer in number. Now many have already departed for the final stage of their plan. Their internal light is soft and muted, a pale silver that seems to reflect the sorrow of their world. They stand in a silent circle, their minds linked in a final collective thought of farewell to the planet that had been their home for longer than humanity has known civilization. This is their final act of transformation, a mainstream historical fact, is that all life on Earth eventually dies and returns to the ecosystem that sustained it. The Lemnians, who lived in perfect harmony with nature, would be no different, but their method is uniquely their own. They are not dying, they are dissolving. They raise their hands, and their physical forms begin to lose their cohesion, their faint inner light, fracturing into a million tiny motes of energy. Their bodies become translucent, shimmering like heat haze. Then they simply dissipate into the air like morning mist burning off in the rising sun. There's no pain, no struggle, just a quiet and peaceful release. They are returning their constituent energy back to the planet, their consciousness merging with the global field they had studied for so long. They are becoming one with the world. They had tried to save a ghost in the machine of the biosphere. You are reminded of the quirky fringe concept of spontaneous human combustion, a mysterious phenomenon where people have allegedly burst into flames without any external ignition source. While dismissed as folklore or misidentified accidents, the image of the dissolving Lemnians offers a strange poetic parallel, a controlled and deliberate version of this idea, a perfect deconstruction of the physical self back into pure energy. Historians still argue about the sudden collapse of various advanced ancient cultures like the Minoans on Crete or the classic Maya in Central America. These societies seem to reach a peak of sophistication and then rapidly decline or vanish, often for reasons that are not entirely clear. Looking at the intentional self-extinction of the Lemnians, you wonder if some of these historical collapses were not disasters, but deliberate withdrawals, echoes of this final retreat, a decision by a ruling priest class to return to the gods, by abandoning their cities and disappearing back into the wilderness, leaving behind their silent monuments. The last Lemnian fades away, and the city is silent for the first time in millennia. The only sound is the dry whisper of the wind, a wind that now carries sand instead of moisture. The sun beats down on the concentric rings of the dead city. The desert has come to claim it. The great civilization of the Green Sahara has vanished, not with a bang, but with a whisper, a quiet act of self-effacement so complete that it would be erased from all human memory, replaced by the shifting sands of time and the fragmented tales of a golden age. The schoolhouse of Sumer is now the only history that humanity remembers. The teachers have left the building, leaving their students to find their own way in a world that was now truly theirs alone, their greatest secret buried beneath their feet and hidden in their own blood. The image of the last Lemnian dissolving into motes of light hangs in your mind, a ghostly afterimage of a civilization's final breath. The silent crystal city of the Rickhat structure is now truly a ghost, consumed and hidden by the encroaching sands of the Sahara. Your perspective shifts, once more moving forward through time, away from the moment of their departure and into the long millennia that follow. You are now a witness, not to the Lemnians themselves, but to the fading echoes of their presence, the distorted legends they left behind in the memory of humanity. You see an Egyptian priest in the Temple of Sais around 600 BC, carefully inscribing a story onto papyrus, a story told to him by an even older priest, a tale passed down through generations. It's the story of a great and powerful island empire, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, an island of concentric rings of land and water, blessed with incredible wealth and advanced technology, a civilization founded by the god Poseidon himself that was destroyed in a single day and night of fire and earthquakes and swallowed by the sea. This is Plato's account of Atlantis, a story that he claimed was a true historical record passed down from the Athenian lawgiver Solon, a mainstream historical fact that has fueled endless speculation for over 2,000 years. You see the priest writing about a city with walls coated in precious metals, a description that sounds like a primitive man trying to describe the pearlescent, self-luminous material of the Lemnian city. He writes of a civilization that had no need for conventional agriculture, a memory of the hydroponic gardens. He writes of a people who were descended from gods, a memory of the serene and powerful Lemnians themselves, but the memory is corrupted. The location is wrong, moved from the heart of a green Sahara to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The quiet, intentional dissolution of the Lemnians and the slow encroachment of the desert has been dramatized into a sudden cataclysmic event, a story more fitting for the human love of epic tragedy. It is the perfect example of how a complex truth can be degraded into a simpler, more digestible myth. You are reminded of a quirky fringe theory that connects the story of Atlantis not to a single location, but to a global seafaring culture that was wiped out by the rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. This theory suggests that survivors of this lost civilization spread out across the world, founding new cultures and leaving behind tales of a great flood and a drowned homeland. This theory, you now realize, is both right and wrong. There was a global culture, the Lemnian network of outposts, and there was a great cataclysm, the death of the Green Sahara. But the story has been conflated and confused over time. The Atlantis myth is not one story. It is a composite memory, a collection of fragmented truths woven together into a single compelling narrative. You see these fragments appearing all over the world. In India, you hear the ancient Hindu myths of Rama's bridge, a causeway built by a divine architect to cross the sea, a faint echo of the graceful bridges that spanned the canals of the Lemnian city. In the Americas, you see the Aztec legends of Aztlan, their mythical island homeland in the north, from which they migrated, a place of advanced knowledge and spiritual power, a distant memory of a Lemnian outpost. In ancient Ireland, you hear the tales of the Tuatha De Dan and a race of godlike beings who came from 4 mythical cities in the north, bringing with them 4 great treasures: a stone, a spear, a sword, and a cauldron. They were masters of magic and science, and after being defeated in battle, they retreated into the hollow hills, the city becoming the fairies and elves of later folklore, a perfect allegory for the Lemnians' withdrawal from the physical world into a different state of being. Historians still argue whether Plato's Atlantis was a fictional cautionary tale, a distorted memory of the Minoan civilization's collapse, or a genuine historical account. As you sift through these fading echoes, you see that it was all of these things the core of the story. The memory of the Lemnian city was real, but it was refracted through the lens of human culture and stitched together with pieces of other local histories and disasters. The beautiful, precise science of the Lemnians became magic. Their advanced technology became divine artifacts. Their serene philosophy became the will of the gods. The most successful vanishing act in history was complete. The Lemnians had not only disappeared physically, they had almost disappeared from memory, their true nature replaced by 1,000 different fables, each one holding a tiny piece of the truth, but none holding the whole picture. They had become the stuff of legend, the ghosts in our cultural attic, the source of our most enduring mysteries. From Atlantis to El Dorado, from Shangri-La to Avalon, all of them faint, distorted echoes of a single great civilization that chose to fade away rather than be remembered as gods, leaving humanity to inherit a world haunted by the quiet memory of a paradise lost to the sands of time. The tapestry of global myths and fading echoes dissolves, and your consciousness returns to the Fertile Crescent, to the land of Sumer. But at a later time, the initial burst of divinely inspired innovation has settled into a more established and human-driven civilization. The cities are larger, the societies more complex, and the memory of the Lemnian teachers has faded, almost completely replaced by a rigid and dogmatic religious structure. The priests, who were once the conduits for whispered knowledge, are now gatekeepers of established doctrine. Their role shifted from discovery to preservation of a tradition whose origins they no longer understand. You are standing in a scribal school in the city of Kish, a place filled with the endless scratching of reed styluses on wet clay. Young boys are laboriously learning the thousands of complex symbols that make up the cuneiform script. It is a difficult and tedious process, a technology that is cumbersome and slow, yet it is the most advanced information storage system this culture has ever known. You watch an old and weary teacher, a man who has spent his life studying the ancient texts. He is frustrated. He is trying to reconcile different versions of a creation, myth, a story that has become convoluted and contradictory over generations of retelling. He senses that there is a deeper, more elegant truth hidden within the clumsy stories of warring gods and cosmic battles, but he has no way to access it. The original scientific clarity of the Lemnian lessons is gone, buried under centuries of poetic embellishment and political manipulation. This is the moment of invention, born not from a flash of divine inspiration, but from a profound sense of loss and frustration. It is the invention of forgetting made manifest. The old teacher realizes that the oral tradition, the passing of stories from mouth to ear, is no longer reliable. The memories are fading, the details are being lost. They need a new way to fix knowledge in time, to prevent it from degrading any further. They need to write it all down. This is a mainstream historical fact, that writing was not invented to create epic poetry or sacred texts. Its earliest uses were for accounting and administration, for tracking grain surpluses and tax records. It was a tool for bureaucracy born from the mundane needs of a complex society, but you now see a deeper motivation behind its development. Cuneiform wasn't just invented to keep track of barley, it was invented to keep humanity from forgetting the last fragments of a science it no longer understood. The priests and scribes began a massive project to record everything they knew, their myths, their histories, their astronomical observations, their mathematical formulas. They were not trying to innovate. They were desperately trying to cling to the decaying remnants of the Lemnian curriculum. They were creating a backup of their entire cultural memory, a snapshot of a fading echo. The development of writing was a technological leap backward, in one sense a move from the instantaneous resonant communication of the Lemnians to a slow, imperfect symbolic system. But it was also a necessary step for humanity. It was our first attempt to build our own library, to become our own teachers. It was an admission that the direct line to the divine teachers was gone, and that we were now on our own. You are reminded of a quirky fringe theory that some ancient scripts, like the Indus Valley script, which remains undeciphered, might not be phonetic or logographic at all, but might represent a completely different kind of information, perhaps astronomical data, or a form of symbolic code. This theory highlights our own biases in assuming all writing must function like our own. Cuneiform itself started as pictogram, simple pictures of things, and evolved into abstract symbols. Perhaps the Sumerians were trying to replicate a form of Lemnian communication that was more symbolic and less linguistic, a concept they could imitate, but not fully reproduce. Historians still argue whether the complexity of early Sumerian society drove the invention of writing, or if the invention of writing enabled the complexity of their society. It is a classic chicken and egg debate. From your perspective, you can see it was a feedback loop. The loss of Lemnian guidance created a need for a new way to preserve knowledge, and the new technology of writing in turn allowed for the creation of more complex bureaucracies and larger empires, a process that pushed humanity further down its own unique path of development. You watch the old scribe carefully drawing the symbol for star on a clay tablet, a simple pictograph that has been stylized over time. He pairs it with numbers, recording the movements of Venus with painstaking accuracy. Doesn't know why this knowledge is important, only that the ancestors decreed it must be recorded. He is preserving a piece of the Lemnian astronomical lesson without any comprehension of the underlying physics or cosmology. He is like a medieval monk dutifully copying a lost work of Greek philosophy in a language he cannot read, preserving it for a future renaissance that he will never see. The invention of cuneiform was the moment humanity began to create its own history, but it was also the moment it sealed the door on its forgotten prehistory. The act of writing things down fixed the corrupted myths into an official canon, turning the distorted echoes into historical fact. The true story of the Lemnians was not just forgotten, it was overwritten with a new and purely human narrative, a story of gods and kings and heroes that would dominate our understanding of the past for the next 5,000 years. The library of clay was being built, and in the process the memory of the crystal City was being buried forever. The dusty scribal school of Kish fades away, and you are violently pulled back through the millennia, landing with a jolt in the present day. The transition is jarring. The cool, sterile air of the German laboratory, a stark contrast to the ancient heat of Mesopotamia. You are back behind the glass observation window, looking at the black tablet, the artifact that started this entire impossible journey. It sits alone in its vacuum chamber, a silent testament to a history that the world has completely forgotten. Dr. Eris and Dr. Petrova and the rest of the team are gathered around a large monitor, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the screen. They have spent months analyzing the tablet, going far beyond the initial discovery of the star map to the Green Sahara. They have found something else, something hidden deeper within the intricate geometric patterns, something that only became visible when they started to think not like archaeologists, but like the Lemnians themselves. They realized the tablet was not a static object. It was interactive. It responded to specific resonant frequencies. Lena Petrova, drawing on the Lemnian concept of a technology based on harmonics, had the brilliant idea to subject the artifact to a range of acoustic vibrations, a process that was more like playing a musical instrument than conducting a scientific experiment. For weeks, they got nothing. Then they tried to replicate the faint background hum they had detected in their initial analysis of the tablet's own subtle energy signature, a sound that was just at the edge of human hearing. When they broadcast this specific frequency at the tablet, something extraordinary happened. A new layer of information appeared on their scans, a hidden message that had been dormant for 12,500 years. It was another map, a celestial map, but this time it was not a map of the past. It was a map of the future. And it was not a map of Earth. It was a map of the solar system. The new data shows the planets of our solar system and their orbits around the sun. But it also shows something else, an intruder, a cluster of objects moving in a highly eccentric long-period orbit that will bring it through the inner solar system. It is a swarm of cometary fragments, remnants of a much larger parent body that broke apart millennia ago. The tablet displays a timeline, a precise countdown to the moment this swarm will intersect with the Earth's own orbit. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Earth is constantly bombarded by small meteors, and that larger impacts have occurred throughout our planet's history, the most famous being the Chicxulub impactor that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The threat of a future impact is very real and is monitored by space agencies around the world, but the objects on this Lemnian map are not on any current list of potentially hazardous asteroids. They have been moving too far out in the dark reaches of the solar system to be detected by our telescopes. The tablet is not just a historical record. It is a warning, a message sent across an ocean of time to alert a future civilization of a predictable and existential threat. The Lemnians knew about this. They had charted the course of this celestial shotgun blast thousands of years ago. Their own departure was driven by the slow death of their homeland, but they also knew that their student species, humanity, would one day have to face its own great filter, a test from the heavens. You are reminded of a quirky fringe area of archaeology that looks for evidence of cosmic impacts in human history. Some researchers suggest that a major cometary impact event around 12,800 years ago, known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, may have caused a sudden and dramatic cooling of the planet, wiping out the Clovis people in North America and the megafauna like the mammoths. This theory is highly debated, but this Lemnian map suggests that such events are a recurring feature of our solar system's environment, and that the Lemnians were well aware of this cycle of cosmic destruction. Historians still argue about the reasons for the Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, a period of widespread societal collapse, famine, and migration across the Mediterranean and Near East. Various theories propose earthquakes, drought, or sea peoples as the cause, but some have suggested that a series of smaller cosmic impacts could have disrupted the climate and destabilized these early civilizations. This new information from the tablet suggests that the Lemnians were not just teaching humanity agriculture and law. They were trying to give us the tools to survive in a dangerous neighborhood. They were trying to fast-track our development to a point where we could understand the threat and hopefully do something about it. Their stone calendars were not just for farming. They were to teach us to look up, to track the movements of the heavens, to become astronomers capable of seeing the danger coming. Their hidden genetic library might even contain the key to surviving such an event, perhaps a way to enhance our resilience or to rapidly advance our technology. When the time comes, the team in the lab is silent, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. They have found the lost history of a ghost civilization, only to discover that it comes with a due date. The artifact is not just the key to our past, it is the key to our future, to a test that humanity has no idea is coming. The Lemnians' final lesson was not one of hope and creation, but a stark and terrifying warning. They had left behind a fire alarm set to go off after 12,000 years, a final desperate attempt by the teachers to save their students from a threat they could not face themselves. The quiet hum of the tablet now seems less like a gentle melody and more like the insistent ticking of a cosmic clock. The silence in the German laboratory is heavier than any stone in any megalithic tomb. It is the silence of a species that has just been handed its own eviction notice, written 12,500 years ago by a ghost. The weight of the revelation is crushing. The cosmic threat is not a matter of if, but when. The team stands frozen, their faces pale in the glow of the screen that displays humanity's final exam, written in the language of orbital mechanics. The immediate human question is, what do we do? How do we prepare? How do we fight a threat of this magnitude? But a deeper, more unsettling question begins to form in your mind, a question that goes to the very heart of the Lemnian mystery. Why would they leave? Why would a civilization of such power and apparent benevolence simply leave a warning and then vanish? Why not stay and help guide us through the danger? Your gaze drifts back to the black tablet humming softly in its chamber, a silent messenger from a dead world. Or is it a dead world? You begin to cycle through the possibilities, a final series of what-ifs to close this impossible story. Perhaps they are truly gone, their dissolution a final and complete end. They merge their energy with the planet's biosphere, and this tablet is their last will and testament, an automated message triggered by our own technological advancement, a final act of long-distance parenting from beyond the grave. This explanation is epic, tragic, and clean, but it doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't align with the sheer, breathtaking patience and foresight the Lemnians displayed in every other action. Then another possibility bubbles up, one that is both more terrifying and more hopeful. What if they aren't gone? What if their dissolution was not an end, but a transformation, a strategic retreat into a different state of being, into another dimension, or into the very fabric of the planet's consciousness, a concept that makes the fringe Gaia hypothesis seem quaintly conservative. They are not dead, they are simply elsewhere waiting. This brings you to a mainstream scientific question that has haunted us ever since we started listening to the cosmos, the Fermi paradox. Whereas everybody, the universe, should be teeming with advanced civilizations, yet we hear nothing but a great profound silence. The Lemnians provide a potential and deeply unsettling answer. Maybe advanced civilizations don't expand outward in a blaze of radio signals and starships. Maybe they expand inward into consciousness, into higher states of being, into the very fabric of reality itself. Cosmologists still argue whether a civilization's ultimate trajectory is endless expansion or a quiet introversion, a transcension into inner space. The Lemnians chose the latter. They went quiet, they went deep, and they are waiting for us to do the same. They are waiting for a signal for humanity to finally prove it has graduated their millennia-long school. Perhaps the threat is the signal, the cometary impact is not a punishment, it is the final exam. They cannot intervene because a teacher cannot take the test for their students. We have to solve this ourselves using the tools they left behind, the dormant knowledge in our genes the mathematical keys, hidden in their stone monuments the scientific curiosity they nurtured in us for thousands of years, and then the final most chilling thought settles in your mind, a synthesis of all these ideas. You look at the black tablet, the artifact that started it all. It responds to a specific resonant frequency, the frequency that unlocked this final warning message, the key that opened the lock. But what if that frequency doesn't just unlock the tablet? What if broadcasting that specific harmonic is the signal they have been waiting for? What if the act of discovering the warning is also the act of ringing a cosmic doorbell, a call across the dimensions to our long-lost teachers? The genetic library inside your own DNA suddenly feels like a dormant receiver, an antenna, waiting for a signal to be broadcast. You realize with a dawning sense of awe and terror that the discovery of this tablet wasn't the end of a historical mystery. It is the beginning of a conversation. You are left with the ultimate question: are the Lemnians truly gone, or did we just call them back? And if they are coming back, are they returning to help us study for the test, or are they simply coming to grade our final paper, a paper that will determine the survival of our entire species? The stark reality of that final question hangs in the cool air of the imagined laboratory, a question too vast for a single night, a single mind to hold. The image of the glowing tablet, the star charts, and the silent team of scientists begins to soften at the edges, losing its sharp focus, like a memory giving way to a dream. The hum of the artifact fades, blending with the soft familiar hum of the fan in your room. The weight of forgotten history and cosmic deadlines lifts gently from your shoulders, becoming lighter and more distant, transformed from an urgent reality into just a story, a wandering thought to be filed away. As you ease now into the quiet stillness of the night, the planet continues its silent turn just as it has for billions of years, completely unaware of the grand dramas we imagine upon its surface. The stars outside your window remain in their familiar places, a beautiful and unchanging backdrop to our fleeting human concerns for tonight. The mystery of the Lemnians can be put to rest alongside all the other thoughts of the day. Their crystal city can sleep beneath its ocean of sand. Their legacy can remain dormant in our sleeping cells, and the great questions of our past and our future can wait for the morning sun. The journey is over, and all that is left is the gentle descent into rest. So let your breathing slow, let your muscles unwind, and let the story we have shared tonight dissolve into the soft background of your own mind, a faint and distant echo, as you drift toward the peaceful oblivion of your own dreams, a place where perhaps on some deep unconscious level you can hear the faintest whisper of a song sung long ago by a people made of light, in an alternate history where Sumer is not the birthplace of human civilization. A rogue archaeologist, Dr. Alara Voss, uncovers a crystalline artifact buried deep within the Antarctic ice. This relic, pulsing with an otherworldly energy, reveals the existence of a lost ancient race, pre-human, extraterrestrial in origin, and far more advanced than any known civilization. As Alara decodes the artifact's cryptic messages, she discovers that this race seeded humanity's development eons ago, leaving behind hidden technologies that could either elevate mankind to godlike heights or unleash catastrophic destruction. Hunted by a secretive global cabal determined to suppress the truth, Alara and her team race against time to unearth the race's lost city beneath the ice. Their findings challenge the foundations of history, religion, and science, forcing humanity to confront a chilling question: are we the heirs of a cosmic legacy or pawns in an ancient experiment that's about to awaken?